Hey, listen to this. Let's demolish the Notre Dame. What's the use of it anyway? Less and less people are religious, and it just occupies a whole lot of space. Like any big city, Paris has huge parking problems. So why not build a multi-story parking garage on the place of the Notre Dame? It's much more practical and certainly much cheaper to maintain than a cathedral like that, right? Sounds absurd, right? No one in their right mind would suggest to demolish such a landmark for this really weird reason. Well, why is that actually? Well, that is because historic landmarks, they play an integral part in forming a nation's cultural identity. They are a symbol of its community. They're a symbol of its achievements. They distinguish the nation from other nations. Landmarks like the Notre Dame, they contribute to a nation's cultural puzzle. Demolish them, and you will cause a piece to go missing and leave a large gap behind. And likewise, in every town, there are historic buildings which contribute to the local cultural puzzle. They are unique manifestations of the past of each town or city. And these buildings are of such historical value that if you would demolish them, they would really damage the cultural identity of that town or city. Let me just illustrate this with a story. I have lived in the Dutch town of Delft for a large portion of my life. And I really love walking, so every once in a while, I take a stroll through the historic town center of Delft. And it's absolutely beautiful. I advise everyone to visit it once in their life. And I was once walking down one of the streets in Delft. To the left and the right, you have those typical Dutch canal houses. But suddenly, there is this gaping hole in a row of houses. It looks really weird. And being the history geek that I am, I even dressed like a historian almost. I went home and even to the archives and did some further research and found out that, astonishingly, the spot was previously occupied by the grand neo-Gothic Roman Catholic St. Hippolytus Church from the 19th century. The church was built in 1886 to accommodate the ever-increasing number of Roman Catholics in Delft, which finally regained their religious freedom after being constitutionally oppressed for centuries after the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. The architect of the church was Pierre Cuypers, one of the most prominent Dutch architects at the time, who also designed the famous Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. His design of the church was to be a manifestation of the re-emerging culture of Roman Catholicism in Delft and the Netherlands, a celebration of their new religious freedom. The parish itself also took an active part in the construction of the church. Parishioners donated furniture, they donated various stained glass windows, and they even donated some bells of the church. This made the church really a monument to the collective effort of the parish. Even though the church was never really finished to the final designs of the architect, it was still a significant addition to the skyline of Delft, and it was a great example of the neo-Gothic architecture of Pierre Cuypers, the reason for which it was later listed as a protected building. And even in the 1960s, it got new shine after a capital restoration. But just at the same time, in those same 1960s, a new problem was emerging. Namely that various Dutch towns, they started to build new suburbs. And people living in city centers, they started to move to these new suburbs. And that, as a consequence, in Delft, had that the two Catholic churches in the city center were becoming underattended. And consequently, there weren't sufficient funds to maintain both two Catholic churches in the Delft center, which coerced the Roman Catholic diocese into creating an independent commission that would make an informed decision on which church should be demolished, the St. Hippolytus Church or the other Catholic church. Yet it happened to be that the other parish of the other church was a rival of the St. Hippolytus parish. And it also happened to be that in the other parish there were several rich businessmen who provided funding for their parish and for Catholic Delft. And these rich businessmen, they paid a very kind visit to the bishop. And they threatened him that they would discontinue their funding for Catholic Delft if their church would be demolished? Well, obviously, the bishop's mind was quite quickly made up, and in 1970, the Independent Commission published their decision to demolish the St. Hippolytus Church. And so it happened that in 1974, the newly restored St. Hippolytus Church was demolished. And guess what? Later in that year, it was replaced by a parking lot. It's much more practical and much cheaper to maintain, right? And remember that obscure modern building from that other picture? Well, it was built sometime later, but it really didn't make the place look nicer. Well, the problem is solved, right? There's one less church to take care of now. It's not as many costs. But what have we really lost here? You know, Delft may be famous for its two medieval churches and its wonderful Renaissance town hall. But the piece of the cultural puzzle representing the re-emerging culture of Roman Catholicism is gone forever. The monument to the collective effort of the Delft Catholics thrown away, irrecoverable. And what is left for posterity, for our young generation? A parking lot with some obscure modern building? Does that do justice to that church that was demolished? Well, I don't really think so. I don't know about you, but I truly don't think so. I was shocked to find out that simply few words by a few rich businessmen deprived Delft of such an important aspect of its historical heritage. How easy it is to lose part of our history and then only to realize what we have lost later on. Now, can you imagine Paris without a Notre Dame? No, it's difficult, right? Then why should we so easily dispose of our own local cultural heritage, of our own historical buildings that are so close to us and so dear to us? Historical architecture helps define our cultural identity, and historical architecture is therefore part of us. We should therefore always think twice what we are throwing away into the eternal dustbin. Thank you.